This is part of a series of videos around tools and activities that you can perform in the control phase of a domain-based project. And this specific video will be on standardization tools and activities. The specific learning objectives are to review some of the common tools that are used to standardize a future state improvement. We'll then take a look at some tips and strategies for the use of these tools when you decide to standardize. And we'll also try to incorporate some of the earlier discussed change management and user acceptance and buy-in concepts within standardization. So you've led a team now through a domain-based process improvement project, and they've gone through define, measure, analyze, and improve, taking a look at current state, identifying root causes, building future state solutions. And here's what's happened. Performance in current state that was low has now been improved, and performance is now at a higher value. The goal of the control phase, how do we sustain those gains? Once the needle moves to this higher value, our job in the control phase is to try to keep it there. Standardization happens after we've measured and monitored and shown that this performance has moved. I bring this up because sometimes it's felt that standardization is all about. I want to be clear, documentation is important. And in just a moment, we're going to give you a list of tools and activities to help create standard work and help standardize future state. But documentation isn't the goal of the control phase. You could spend an enormous amount of time and effort, in your team and yourself together, documenting what are the activities that are being performed in the process, but end up with documentation that just describes how to perform a process and keep it at a low level of performance. Documentation alone is not the key for successful control phase. We've got to have more than just that. And so let's take a look at some of the tools and activities we do to help standardize future state. So to create better levels of standardization, uh, documentation and SOPs are going to be important. But I like to incorporate other tools to help with that documentation and creation of SOPs. In the end, documentation and SOPs are useful tools, but they rely too much on words. Words are nice, but words are easy to ignore. And when we ignore documentation and SOPs, we won't get that standardization that we're looking for. I'm a big fan of visual job aids and checklists to support the activities that were created in our documentation and SOPs. Training is also an important consideration. Anytime we make a change to future state, we're going to want to make sure that we're providing people with the prerequisite skills, competencies, and knowledge of the tools that are going to be used to sustain those gains. And so we'll take a look at some training techniques. And finally, we'll wrap things up with some application of change management principles. Let's take a look at some specific examples of all of these. Ways to help with standardization beyond just simple documentation. I'm now pulling information from the Business Process Improvement Workbook, and this picture, this visual aid that was created and posted right at the terminal screens where customer data entry was taking place, supported the document that was put in an SOP binders document, and it described almost 15 pages of text that was in that binder. It was located right at the place of work, described how the steps involved and how to enter values into the somewhat complex web form entry screen. And one of the reasons why I wanted to show this was that it not only was located where the work was being performed and done so in a visual way, but these types of conversion of documents into pictures-based documents are activities that third-party providers can perform for you. There are many different third-party providers that'll do that. You can send your documentation and their team of design experts will build something like this, or they'll build the exploded out picture of all of the parts that go into building a particular product. If you don't have those resources or skill set within your organization, you can go to outside resources for it. Great visual job aid. Let's take a look at another one. Here's another example of a visual job aid. Again, what I love about it, color coding, additional ways to contact people if you're confused, and pictures to help support the complex set of activities. This could be dozens of pages in a documentation binder, but one simple schematic can really help. Again, third-party providers can help you with this if this is a skill set that you and your team don't have available to you. Let's take a look at a couple of other simple job aids. Sometimes the visual job aid doesn't necessarily have to be a document or a diagram. Sometimes the job aid can be the specific tool. And the thing that I wanted to show here is making sure that the tools are located right where the job is being performed. I know that there is often a tendency to put it in a centralized area, which then means that you don't have to have as many replicated tools. But if it's a commonly used tool, to make sure that those activities are commonly performed, place the job aid where the work is being performed. Let's take a look at a couple of other visual job aids that also incorporate checklists. So for this example, I'm just extending the use of tools. I just got done saying place the tool where the work is being performed. But if you can't do something like this, and it does have to be centralized, notice what they've done here. They've created the classic shadow board, a lean thinking concept sometimes associated with 5S or workplace organization, where when a tool is pulled away, there's a shadow that shows that that tool is no longer being used. What I really like here is they also incorporated a checklist to show when the end of a shift occurs, who's responsible for checking to make sure that the tools are back in their common location. Again, this just helps with standardization. Let's take a look at a couple of other visual ways to create standard work. I love this example here. Blue item, blue visual display to show where it's located. No directions need to be created at all. Anybody can understand where that piece of equipment is supposed to be located. One final tip as it relates to creating standard work and using visual aids, and it's actually tied to documentation. So sometimes you do have to document, and those documents typically go into library areas. But how do you know when the binder or the documents are missing or out of order? Here was a very simple way with this line right here to show the proper order and sequence of those documents. All of these are just really simple and straightforward ways to help reinforce standardization. Now that we've taken care of visual job aids and checklists, a couple of quick thoughts on training. Training is always an important aspect of maintaining the future state solution. I know that in our root cause analysis video, we talked about how training can't be a root cause, but training will always be part of the way that I create standardization in future state. If you're changing the way that work is being done, you want to make sure that people have the prerequisite skills and competencies and ability to work with the tools that are needed to be successful. But training should be in two parts. There should be short form training is knowledge nuggets available when you need it and in a format that is digestible enough that it will only take minutes or seconds to receive that training. Whether they're short form lecture videos, kind of like what we're doing right now, or they are quick cheat sheets, they're small form digestible nuggets. Long form, the half day, full day, multi day workshops, long form training is very immersive, but it there are retention issues for it. And because it's in such a longer form, there's less of an opportunity for you to get that training over and over again. Of the two formats, I try to have my teams focus much more on short form over long form training. Finally, I think it's really important that as we're building these tools and creating this documentation, SOPs, visual job aids, checklist, and training, that we have to be mindful of the change management principles that were covered in earlier parts of this program. We go back to the old Meyer equation, Q times A equals E, where E is your effective business result, where the gains are being sustained. We have to make sure and be mindful of user acceptance and buy-in. We may have a great solution that does create higher performance, but if our approach to standardize it is such a bitter pill for process workers and stakeholders affected by the solution, we could end up creating the backsliding just through the effort and labor involved with the standardization. I love control plans. On the course materials website, we have some control plan templates, but I've sometimes seen how really rigorous control plans that create additional mountains of work for your process workers actually reduces process performance and allows for backsliding to occur. I'm not in any I'm not trying to suggest that a control plan shouldn't be used, but just be mindful that all of the tools used for standardization, you'll want to create that buy-in. This is a great opportunity to have process workers and subject matter experts help in the tools and techniques and activities that you want to roll out and implement to sustain those future state gains. Standardization is an important part of the control phase, and creating standard work is vital to sustain those gains. Utilizing the combination of documentation, SOPs, visual job aids, checklists, training, and applying those change management principles will help you and your teams create those sustained gains that we're looking for.